Okay, this is a continuation of a video that I posted a day or so ago, and I indicated that the next video was going to be speaking on the Egyptian god Anubis. However, I'm going to reserve that till the next video, and I'm going to direct our attention to another Egyptian god that was worshipped, and going to show some interesting things about that god, as all gods are represented relative to the human anatomy. So without further ado, I'm going to draw up some documents here. And we're going to look at those. And I just made this video and spent about 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, and I failed to hit the record button. So again, this task of bringing all this out is requires a lot of patience, a lot of stick-to-itiveness, that's for sure. That was discouraging. But anyway, let's move on. We're going to talk about, every now and then I'm going to look down to make sure that this is still recording. So please indulge that. Okay. I'm going to open a series of 4 pictures here. And then if I can get through this short, but sometimes I get a little bit long-winded, if I can get through this aspect, dealing with this deity and where it's located in the human anatomy relatively quickly, then I may go ahead and just go on into the discussion and the discovery of the god Anubis. But let's get to it so I might be able to reach that objective. I'm going to open this first document here. Okay, here's primarily the Egyptian god. They worshipped a lot of gods, just like religion around the world does today. But we're going to focus on the baboon. They reverenced and worshipped the baboon. And by the time these series of 4 pictures are covered, we'll know why they did that and where they got that idea from. Again, a large aspect of the discoveries that I've made have to do with linguistics and have to do with a very unorthodox but effective, methodologically effective in coming to find these realizations as it concerns animal symmetries, religious deity related to and extracted virtually in every way, in every society, in every culture from the human anatomy. But over here, I have a picture of a gorilla, which is related to the baboon. And I just phonetically refer to the gorilla in a phonetic sense as a gorilla. That is, if you see my cursor right here, where you see the word gorilla going vertically here, I refer to this image as a gorilla. Gorilla. Yes, the gorilla, the baboon, as worshipped as a deity and as being the root of a lot of other concepts and ideas that have been assimilated in modern culture from the ancients. These are religious gorillas that are profitless and they're not benefiting humanity and certainly not encouraging proper intellectual, moral, and spiritual comprehension and value and living and believing. Over here, I refer to the baboon. I've got it written here, and I refer to it as the Babel or the Babaloon. That is the expansion, like a balloon being expanded. The balloon started to be blown up way back in the time of Egypt. They started blowing on this religious balloon, and over 4,000, 5,000 years, that balloon has expanded into all the religious institutions that we have today. Not the least of which is the many sects of so-called, well, Christendom, so-called self-professed Christians. We'll get into that. We'll uh, examine that profession in light of the proofs and axioms and the evidence that I'm going to be presenting about a great majority of the origin of what they believe in Christendom's religion, and of course around the world in the whole sum of religious ideology, philosophy. But Babel, of course, Babel comes from a term which means confusion, and it originated at the Tower of Babel when the languages were confused. That's where that term originated from. But I'm going to read this real quickly. It says baboons are extremely aggressive. That this was a reference source that was dealing with Egypt's beliefs in the baboon as being worshipped as a deity. It says baboons are extremely aggressive and omnivorous, and Babby was viewed as being very bloodthirsty. Isn't that interesting? Bloodthirsty. That's pretty much synonymous with religion throughout the history of human civilization, even to today. Bloodthirsty. The worship of these gods and their ideas and their principles that they have religiously motivates them and compels them in behalf of their gods and their deities that they worship to become bloodthirsty, warmongering, murderous, hateful, racial, etc., etc. This is the product of an irresponsible approach to spirituality, to mental delusion, to psychological, mental, and spiritual delusions, superstitions. But anyway, it draws in, it kind of focuses in on interesting aspects of the things they said about this baboon god and the purpose of the reason why they worshipped it and the so-called myths around it. But it's not as mythical as these concepts didn't just pop up in people's mind. There was a root cause for it all, and it's the human anatomy. And we're going to get to that. It says that the baboon was referred to as living in the entrails. Interesting. There we go with the entrails again. The innards, the bowels, feces, dung, the dung beetle, the scarab beetle, and was thus said to stand by a lake of fire. Wow. All the way back to the Egyptians, they were believing in this thing called a lake of fire. And they were utilizing that in their worship of their false gods, going so far as sacrificing their own children, burning them to death in worship of these false demon gods and ideas and deities that came from not just their imagination, but from the influence of demons, intelligent spirit creatures out to get humankind. And one of the primary fundamental ways that they get the masses is through false, pagan, heathen, wicked, sexually perverted religion. But anyway, it says representing destruction. Of course, we have the concept of there may be a true understanding of the lake of fire. There may be many false beliefs about what that lake of fire represents. Again, the Bible uses the expression lake of fire, but the Bible does not refer and does not mean a literal lake of fire. And that's what, we may get to that eventually, or I may just defer that and not even discuss that. But I will discuss what the religions believe about the lake of fire. The Hindus have that belief, hot, cold fires, people tormenting. Christendom, pretty much across the board, loves to teach their adherents that their God is arbitrary, hard to please, cruel, angry, vindictive, spiteful, not forgiving, not loving, not tender, not just, and just loves and just looking for the opportunity to burn people in fire and to watch them suffer and to take pleasure in it. That's not the God, Yahweh. It's not. And yet Christendom propagates this sinister concept, imputing to Yahweh, the true God. Now, I'm talking about all the false gods, but there's only one true God. But anyway, it also goes on to say baboons also have noticeably high libidos. Now, the reason why I have these words capitalized is because through my understanding and because I've learned these principles and these methodologies of observation and viewing, I have scientifically discovered principles of how to look into the human anatomy and find, based upon not just the phonetics of the human anatomical terms, as well as the phonetics of what the Egyptians called these gods, but also the stories behind them give scientific, factual, predictive knowledge of where these animals will be found. So at this point, we know that the story goes that the baboons related to the entrails. Okay, we know, according to the human anatomy, where that's located, don't we? It says baboons also have noticeably high libidos. Okay, we know what the term libido refers to, don't we? Yeah, we know what that refers to. We certainly do. And the ancients utilized these false religious gods to and worship them in sexual fertility rites and orgies. Well, whole communities got together and stripped down and had orgies in worship of these gods. These sexually, these, this is the origins of religion. And the roots and the veins of these concepts and these ideas have never ceased to continue to work their way throughout all human civilization down through history over the last 5,000 to 6,000 years. So we know that scientifically, and of course I'll demonstrate how this is science, the more that this is a discovery. That's what this theorem is all about. So we know that the baboon, the gorilla, is going to be found next to the entrails, and libido refers to the sex drive, so it's going to be referring to the sexual as well, the abdominals. It says, in addition to their high level of genital markings. So again, it's still confining us to one section to look at the human anatomy to find this baboon, this gorilla, this ape, this gorilla, this Babel of gods. Look at the genital area. That's what this is telling us, these stories of the past. And it says Babi was considered, or Baba, however it's pronounced, was considered the god of virility. There again, it's all adding up. Entrails, libido, genital, virility. Danger, Doctor Who. Beep, 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 radar. Look at the entrails. Look at the libido. Look at the genital. Look at the virility. Look at all the, that's where you'll find it. Am I delusional? We'll see. Said he was usually portrayed with an erection. Phallic worship predominates throughout all religions in one form or another. One spell in a funerary text identifies the deceased person's phallus with Babi, ensuring that the deceased will be able to have sexual intercourse in the afterlife. And later on, I'm going to get into some commentary, some hard-hitting commentary about all these religions out here that are teaching these concepts, these false ideas derived from demon-inspired messages that were delivered to the ancients, either directly, personally, verbatim to their face, or through history, through cuneiform inscriptions, through knowledge being passed over of these events, whether directly or indirectly. These ideas that there's sexual intercourse waiting, just look at that. You die, you go out and bomb somebody, you go out and kill for your God. That God's going to let you have a lot of sex when you get to your afterlife. Virgins, not just sex with prostitutes, virgins. You're going to have all you need, so just go do it. Get it done, and as soon as you die, you're off having just the greatest sexual time of your life. How has human society allowed this to continue? The vice, the disgusting perversion, the bloodthirstiness, the warmongering. How has society continued to indulge this for this long? What can society do about it? But we're going to get into all these religions out here that teach basically the same things here. You see, this was 5,000 years ago. These concepts were built around baboon, and yet religions today still retain those, don't they? It passes over. Just like idiomatic and encoded meaning passes over even when you transliterate one language to another. I'm going to show what I have learned from a linguistic standpoint across all barriers of language. I don't consider myself linguistic. I consider myself a highly intuitive person who has delved deep into phonetic, phoneme, phonology, idiom, sounds, all of those things. That's how I've approached languages, many languages. And I have discovered a principle running throughout all languages, a principle that allows an understanding of things that have been lost and that have been laying dormant. In a lot of senses, the information has been lying dormant within language systems. Very complex things that's going to take a lot of time to intellectually and vocally articulate. But that is going to be an aspect of my theorem deeper down into this ocean of information and extra data that we have of the human body, which basically records the history of human civilization, religion, anthropology, and a lot of other things. I need to make sure I'm recording. Okay. All right, let's go to the next image. I'm going to be drawing a lot of these images ultimately over time into Photoshop. Right now, I'm just familiarizing myself with the complexities of Photoshop. I still have a basic fundamental ability to navigate it, but I'm applying myself to go ahead and break down and become proficient at it so that I can really, really make these discoveries and these things pop in the minds and the faces of religion and the religious masses and the religious leaders and the religious organizations. But here I show an image, an MRI of the human body. My cursor, if you can see it in the center, is going over to this form. This is the human anatomy, MRI. And of course, just in this area, there's the rabbit, the worshiping of the rabbit. There's a rabbit there, falcon, horse, Akhenaton, Tut, gorilla, baboon, Anubis, Uraeus, cobra, etc., etc. It's all there. And I'm going to make that evident. But for now, we're going to focus on the gorilla. Up here, I have the word apes. And I was looking at some phonetics there. I won't get into that. I don't want to kind of bog this down with those associative aspects. I'll get down and actually devote a few videos to those principles and methodologies of viewing, of observation, and of information, and storing, and charting, and mapping, and recording, and things like that. The linguistic, phonetic, sound equivalency, and things like that. Things that led, or kind of associative things that led to these discoveries. But I will draw attention to the gorilla. The phylum name is Chordata. And I use that phonetically, and I'll go ahead and say that. We are getting to the core data found relative to the human anatomical form. Yes, the core or the root template of all religious systems, all deities, all animals worshipped, all deities worshipped, the core template or the body, pun intended, of information that all religious systems were extracted from, originated, and gradually evolved were found in the human anatomy. So I utilize the word for gorilla, chordata, as a means of kind of saying this particular sentence, that we are getting to the core data of religion as well as its affinity, almost inseparable affinity to the human anatomy. We are dissecting or serrating, just like the priests were in their dark rooms, chopping up dead bodies and looking at them and scrutinizing them visually and in all kinds of other ways, and manipulating human corpses in every different direction. Over a period of at least 2 millennia, they were doing this. they discovered through that pursuit of false worship, in a sense, from which they derived all of their religious systems, they were extracting the information visually, which demonstrated to them that they saw the same thing, that the human anatomy forms all animals in creation. And for the most part, they took these animals and they made deities out of them. They extracted the concepts and the symmetries and the proportions and the vivid animals all over the human form, and they took them out and created superstitious and irresponsible, mentally, intellectually, gods out of them, and really believed that they had power. Going down to the baboons here, it calls them similiforms. And of course, their chordata, which shows the relationship with the gorilla, the affinity with gorilla. But it refers to the baboons as similiforms. And indeed, again, I use this phonetically to express this point. The similar forms, that is, the similar forms of animals, of animal symmetries, are found on the human anatomy. All of them. I know I don't have the ability right now, because I don't have the technology to fully utilize and implement, to bring these discoveries fully and with the utmost of robustness to present it. But given the scientific and mathematical definitiveness of these discoveries, which I will be showing over a long period of time via videos, I assure that if it was possible to take a muscular bound man and woman and put them on a revolving table or inside some kind of sphere that would lock them to where they could be rotated every degree, 360, every degree, one way or the other, every different direction around a sphere. And if they had MRI machines, CT scans, and X-rays equipment set up, scanning all this motion as the human body is returned and rotated, and they were able to take thousands and thousands, if not millions, of images of the body over a period of time. When they took all of that data and images and put them in a long algebraic time continuum on then they would discover every animal, every insect, every flower, every idol, every image, every icon. Pyramids of Egypt, I'm going to show it. The Sphinx, I'm going to show it. Vividly. Horus, Osiris, Isis, the so-called all-seeing eye, the scarab beetle, all of them. The Hindu elephant, the pagan orgy-worshipping, sex fertility-worshipping Easter bunnies. The stories, the religious lies that we feed our children and tell them it's okay, despite that this was related to false demonic sex orgies and rites underneath statues of Tammuz and Ishtar. It's okay, the kids, we know that, or maybe you don't know that. But what are people going to do when they find that out? Are they going to stop? History tells us they won't, and they don't. Maybe some will. Let's go to the next image. Here I have, to the far left, the same image as before, and this represents the abdominal region, the side, the rib cage, going down to the pelvic bones, going down into the reproductive organs, to the fallopian tubes, to the reproductive organs, to the vaginal area, to the genitalia, and of course, if this was a male figure, it would be a phallus, a penis, and I've got this same image inverted. Now, I'm going to bring this to light. By the way, this image will appear infinite amount of times, as many amount of human bodies are on the face of the earth through MRI. You will see that this image of a baboon, a gorilla, will be found in those areas of any human who goes through an MRI, CT scan, X-ray. Not just that, but these images, the faces, the expressions, the posture of the body will change relative to how the what angle the body is set at when these images are taken. But if you don't see the semblance of a rabbit there, with the floppy ears, the eyes, the nose, everything, you're about ready to, vividly. Here's the gorilla, the baboon. And I've got it cut off to the right here. This is extracting the information of the human anatomy that does not form part of the symmetry of the object that we're looking at right now, which is the false deity of the baboon. You see, this is before, this one right here, right above the real gorilla is a picture of the parts of the anatomy that represent the gorilla. And you look up, you'll see the semblance of a mouth. You'll see the semblance of an eyes. You actually see the weird anomalous shape of the head, which is kind of strange in the animal world relative to the gorilla. You see the shoulders formed by the pectoral bone, the pectoral, and it goes down into its chest area, into the sides, the fallopian tubes, the reproductive organs of the woman, and you'll see this forms a gorilla. And over here, and of course, I'm going to bring all these images into Photoshop and make this even more vivid and easier to see ultimately with time. But I've got so much on my plate to get out. I'm trying to synchronize and chronologically do this in a way that has the maximum effect. So at this point, I'm trying to decide how to create a continuum here of information as discovered, and a chronology of thought and discovery that will be easier to present, easier to understand and comprehend for those listening and watching these videos. But here's the baboon god down here, and of course, if you look down to the far right picture image in the pink of the baboon statue in Egypt, you look down between its legs, and of course you see the gonads represented there. But if you go up and look at the symmetry of this cloak or this shawl kind of that is wearing, and follow the symmetry of that, and look at the palms on the knees, you'll see that it actually forms the semblance of the shape of the female reproductive system organs. But we'll get to that. But here you see a baboon, a monkey, a gorilla, and next image is going to kind of inflect that a little bit more, along with some commentary. And again, these images, this is just one human figure. I can avail myself of thousands of MRI, of thousands of different human figures. And this gorilla, this baboon, will be vivid in every image. And their facial expressions, again, everything will change consistent with the angle. So we're going to actually, in a sense, watch this gorilla move. Like I said, if you were able to take images, simultaneous images of this portion of the human anatomy, just referring to this particular god, of course, I'm going to show that every god is found. Every god ever worshipped is found in the human anatomy. But if you actually took this human body that's being depicted here and started taking maybe 1,000 images, rotate 1 degree and take 1,000 images, and rotate 1 degree, 1,000 images, and then change the direction and take 1,000 images 1 degree and change the direction, then literally this symmetry, this still, static, fixed, non-moving image would begin to become animated through the video, converting still images into a video by putting slides together, taking different language. Any creature, any god, any object that appears in the human anatomy, any animal, can be made animate, can move. Their facial expressions can change. Their eyes can open, can close. Their mouth can open, their close. Their ears can go up, can go down. Their necks can turn based upon the still images being on the body taken from different directions, changing the orientation, rotational symmetry of the object being viewed or the animal being viewed. I'm going to stop trying to use the term fascinating and spectacular. No, this is serious. This is sobering. For the most part, it's haunting and sobering for religion, because we're about ready to bust it wide open. Down here at the bottom, I've got written to the far left, 2 ancient gods found relative to the human anatomy. Here I've only shown one god. When I refer to 2 ancient gods, I'm not referring to the gorilla and the baboon. I'm referring to another deity, which I said that I would get talking about in this video, but probably going to be reserved to the next video. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, is right here as well. So is Horus, the falcon, vividly. And Horus the falcon, Anubis, will change posture, will change direction of their head, and all the symbology will be there relative to many different MRIs of many different human bodies. It's the age of information, people. That does not bode well for religion. I wrote down here also, please, in other words, the 2 ancient gods found relative to the human anatomy. One is the one I've demonstrated here through imagery. The other one is the Anubis, the jackal-headed god, which I'm going to speak about and show in the next video. But I do encourage any who is interested in reading a book that was written. It's called The Two Babylons, and it was written by Alexander Hislop. If you can find that book, buy that book, or find some kind of reference to your ability to read that book, that is a very profound and very arduous and very well-researched book into the origins and evolution of religion, and in a lot of ways kind of showing where modern-day religious institutions, including the whole of the doctrines of Christendom and Christianity, have came from. It's not good. It's not good. They can make it sound good and look good and get on the pulpit, make everything sound so innocent, harmless, and fun and godly. And the Lord came down and told me, God spoke to me, God told me to tell you this, oh, you got to leave. They can do, okay, well, it don't bode well for those people, those religious leaders, just like those demonic scribes and scribe priests that built the religious system for the Egyptians and manipulated the political rulers, pharaohs, manipulated them and rode their back and made the usually logical and noble and at least trying to keep human society together world rulers have been duped by these religious leaders, have been led like pawns and like puppets by these religious leaders throughout civilization. They did the same thing back in Egypt. They run things. The Pharaoh didn't run things. In a lot of ways, religious leaders run things today. But that's going to change. Watch and see. I'm going to read this next part over here, and then I'm going to get off of here and start the long journey of speaking about Anubis. And then after that, the next god, and the next god, and the next image, and the next idol, and the next animal. And I put up here human-animal comparisons. The baboon gorilla is found where the phonetics and religious stories indicate it will be. I've not fully articulated how that these discoveries that were made that I'm expressing now have a lot to do with my unorthodox approach and study and scrutiny of language systems, primarily as regards phonetic sounds, phoneme, phonology, encoded meaning, idiom, passing over language barriers. In actuality, the information from the original hieroglyph, the information from the original Hebrew is found idiomatically and phonetically still existing. It was retained no matter what language it was transliterated into. And this applies to every language. I'm going to show this. But as it concerns these comparisons, the baboon here was derived from the part of the human anatomy that I've shown here. And I'm going to actually break it down and show what parts of the baboon or the gorilla are formed by what parts of the human anatomy. I'm just going to read this real quickly, and you can compare these images as I'm reading to see that. When I refer to the animals, I'm referring to the baboon and the gorilla as demonstrated. So as I read this, I'm just going to say animals as referring to those two. These animals' genitalia fall where the human genitalia are. The side of the animal represents the female reproductive organs of the human anatomy, as well as the abdominal area and the pubic area of the gorilla, and the side and the obliques and the hip part of the hips, actually above the hips in the abdominal area, fall relative to basically those same parts of the human anatomy, just like the genitalia of the animals fall where the genitalia of the humans are. Now, just remember, this is all. A lot of this to the Egyptians about sex worship, about fertility, about afterlife, about being reborn. Interesting enough, about being chopped up into pieces and then being put back together, etc., etc. The animals' face, mouth, eyes, and head form above the pubic area and into parts of the abdominal area, just under, as if being kind of sheltered by the rib cage in the human form. And of course, the head and the eyes all fall in where inside the body, as from an organ standpoint, is located the entrails. And of course, remember, this baboon god was referred to as being associated with the entrails. It says the animal's shoulders are formed by the pubic bone of the human form. Look at the images and you'll see that. The shoulders of the gorilla are formed by the shoulders and the top part of the trapezius, the deltoid, the bicep, all are formed by the pubic area of the human anatomy. The arms of the animal are formed by the outer thigh. You can see that by looking at the image. And it's interesting, I just put just kind of a little side point here. The Bible actually uses the term outer thigh in interesting ways. And maybe if you get a chance, you can check into what the Bible has to say about this usage of the outer thigh and what it kind of idiomatically meant to the Hebrews at that time, and maybe even other surrounding contemporaneous nations as well. I'm not sure about that, but I know that it was a biblical term and it had a specific meaning to the ancient patriarchs of Judaism. It says the animal's legs are formed by the inner thigh of the human form. So the legs, relative to the human anatomy, form both the arms and the legs of the baboon or the gorilla anatomy or symmetry. And of course, I'll have written here Horus times 2. In other words, Horus the falcon is found on both legs facing opposite directions. We'll see that. And Horus appears there, and Horus appears throughout the body. As well, Isis, Osiris, and all the other Egyptian gods are found throughout the body. By the way, this isn't the only place the gorilla is found in the body. When we get to the outside exterior muscular form with inverted images, you're going to see some amazing, profound images of the gorilla, the baboon, and every other animal. But just as a side point, and I'll get to this eventually, it's too much to do, too little time. Horus, the falcon, which was one of the predominant gods of the Egyptian religious system of things, false religious, demonic, satanic religious system of things, is represented herein as well, and I will get to that as my theory proceeds. But I'll continue. The religious origin of belief in the baboon god originated in human anatomy. It's just a mere symmetry and proportion, religious people. There's no such thing as sacred drum. Yes, you may call it sacred, but it's still just a shape. It's just a symmetry and a proportion. It can't move. It can't be animated. It can't really jump out at you and hurt you, burn you in fire, chop you up, kill you, strike you. And it can't do good for you. It can't help your life. It can't help you. It can't make things happen good for you if you believe in it. It's just a symmetry. It's not even a real animal. It's just a shape on the human anatomy. And part of my Facebook page, again, I'm indicating that I personally, as well, in an intellectual way, from a historical and information standpoint, am drawing into mix the narcissism of this world, narcissistic people, narcissistic institutions, the narcissism of religion, the narcissism of religious leaders, the narcissism of their adherents, the narcissism of commercialism, the narcissism of political. I'm dealing with all of this. When I say I'm saying the research and the discoveries that I've made are going to elegantly draw in this worship, this profitless and worship of false deities extracted from the imaginations and the symmetries in nature. It's nature worship too. A lot of the symmetries, religion is famous for worshiping symmetries in nature. But predominantly, most of the religious aspects and root causes of religions and doctrines and ideas and gods are extracted from animals, beasts. The Bible talks about animalistic men. They just love to anthropomorphize and bring to life creatures and inflate them and bring them up to gods and deity status and then worship them. Murder for them, go to war for them, rape for them, bomb for them, sexually molest for them, sexually have orgies for them, get drunk for them, sacrifice their children in the fire for them, etc., etc. And I won't, the last part of this comment that I made, I'm going to get to it in the next video. In other words, I'm going to show Anubis.